Welcome to the Bridge the Gap podcast. Here's your host, Dustin Udke.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Bridge the Gap. Here again on a Tuesday, back on Tuesdays after last Wednesday's episode. We got a good one tonight. We're going to be talking communication, not just, how you communicate, but like how and why you communicate and the way to do it. So I brought in a friend of mine, Jake King. He's a political communications expert. Jake, how are you tonight?
Hey man, I'm doing well. I'm excited. I feel so honored, and it's cool having expert. I don't feel like an expert, but I like hearing it. So maybe I'll start saying I'm an expert.
Why don't you are an expert. Why don't you give people a little bit of your background and where you come from and what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, I don't brag about it, but I'm from Ohio. But I went to school for public relations and Spanish. And after that, I came to Madison. I was doing some kind of local level, like community outreach stuff, like kind of like healthcare marketing and outreach for a clinic that like helped an underserved population. I went to work at a nonprofit after that. And then for the past 4.5 years, I was working in local government for the city of Sun Prairie, leading our communications efforts and equity efforts. And now I'm the deputy communications director to Greta Neubauer, who's a state representative, but she's also the minority leader in the assembly here for Wisconsin for the Democratic caucus. So, yeah, I get to be at the Capitol now, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and so you were with Sun Prairie, so a town communications, political in some lens. Now you're with a actual state representative, so you're young. You're kind of getting into this political communication. So I think you have a lot of we've talked quite a bit. We went out to Costco. I took you to Costco a couple weeks ago, and we talked about
communication. Real quick, you gave me such a good. I told people I was like, "Hey, I went with my friend to Costco." He gave me the most detailed rundown, and they were like, "Yeah, that's pretty." Like for people who love Costco, they love doing that, and so I commend you. But there's more like you.
There are. Costco is like its own little like cult that's forming. It's the Costco cult. But we talked a lot about like, communicating and how, not just like what you say, but how you say it and kind of that process. So that's why I wanted to bring you on to talk about that. How would you or your friends describe your your personal communication style?
I mean, I think they'd probably call me like an idiot because I think so. One, I think it's like my person. I was like, I just like to joke and have fun. My family was super sarcastic. Like my dad's really energetic and charming. And like, he's a really good, like just talk to personality. And I don't know if I just got some of that. I think they like in a non-professional setting, I think people would say like, Jake's a jokester. He likes to poke and have fun and he's sarcastic. And I'm working on it because not everyone reads sarcasm. I think professionally though, when I'm allowed to joke at work or like in a presentation, but I try to be like, I don't know, like savvy with my words because I'm in a political context now, more political than what I was in. And so what I say really matters. And so I just try to be mindful of that. So I like to say like maybe more of a strategic communicator when it calls for it. But other than that, I just like to joke and poke fun.
Yeah. And so full term, me and you are friends. We've been friends for probably 5-6 years now. I would agree. I think you're very much kind of that jokester, but you are very mindful and thoughtful in your communication. Even like just in a friend sense, like you are very like measured in what you say versus like me, who's just very blunt, right? Like I
like that. It works for you. I like that.
Yeah. People like you and our friends know that like I'm the blunt guy of the group and I will just tell you straight up how it is. And I don't care if you like it or not, like this is what it is. Do you think are you more of an in-person phone call, or are you more of like a text email type communicator?
Well, okay. So a couple things. I will say this. One time I switched from having a smartphone to a basic phone, just personal wellness reasons. And I didn't realize how much people if you call someone, they're expecting a full length conversation. I was just calling people because I'm like, this is just so much work to text on my basic phone. Yes. And so like, I would say one, as a texter, I try to be like good, but I'm now to the point where it's like, I treat it like emails. Like I have 24 hours to respond, but I'm growing into being a bad texter. Like I have text on my phone that's like, oh, you haven't texted this person since Wednesday or responded. So I'm growing into a poor texter. However, I would say if it's something that I know warrants past like 5 minutes, I call. Like, hey, let's just talk this out. It's easier than texting. So I'm turning into more of a caller and getting worse as a texter.
Yeah, I am not a great texter. I'm a much more of a call you and let's talk type person. Partially because I'm a big believer in the how you say something matters, and that gets lost. Like sarcasm is lost over text.
Totally.
Even
Like,
heartfeltness is a lot of times lost over text and email. So I got a text today and was like, "Hey, I really appreciate you doing this," and it just kind of felt very like, and I know it came from that person's heart, but it felt like just reading it was like it felt very just kind of like they had to do it. And I'm much
yes.
let me call and let me hear that inflection in your voice. So I'm much more of a phone call. Plus, being a direct and blunt person, it can come off very calloused in text. So if someone's, let's just take it at work. If someone's like, "Hey, this is what's happening," and I go, "Hey, that's not right." It makes me sound like I'm saying like, "Hey, you're an idiot." It's like, no, I'm just saying like it's not a personal indictment on who you are as a person. It's just saying, "Hey, this is not the right way to do it." So I edit football articles and people are like, I'm like, "Hey, this is how you do this." And they go, "Oh, I'm sorry, I was so bad." It's like, no, it's not an indictment of you. I'm just trying to show you the correct way. And sorry, I didn't sugarcoat it. Just, you did it wrong. This is how you do it. Doesn't mean that you're a horrible person. Just means like you didn't know the right way. And so like I need to have that personal touch of like, let's just call or get on a FaceTime or whatever it is, or get on a Zoom call like this and talk about it so it's not lost that way.
This is so this is where like my PR strategic, like, let's say, Dustin, you and I are beefing. You probably might be more inclined to just be like, "Hey, I'm just going to be direct with Jake, call him up, whatever."
Yeah.
I wouldn't say I'm the most like I love conflict. So my mind goes like, "Oh, if I see Dustin calling and I know we have beef, we could just text about it, because then I have more time to prep my responses and like counter move, type like, oh, I can just adjust it, edit it, perfect it, rather than being put on the spot." So that's usually when I'm a good texter. If it's like, "Oh, we're beefing about something, but I can control the setting and like communicate better." But I agree with you. Like, tone gets lost, and it just makes me think, one time in high school, my mom and stepdad like took my car and they filled up the gas more than what it was, and I texted and put in all caps, "Thank you for filling up my car." They must have forgotten they did it or something, and my mom reamed me. She was like, "You don't need to be sarcastic for whatever, like this is totally inappropriate, we just used your car one time." And I was like, "No, I legitimately thought you filled it up, and I just got my butt handed to me." So
yeah, I mean, I've long thought there needs to be like a sarcasm font on text. Like it just needs to be like this is the universal sarcasm font that you use when you're being like, I know people do like the cap and lowercase and like that's like the sarcasm font, which is just super annoying to do. And so I think when there is conflict, I will be the person. I enjoy conflict. So I'll be the one to call you, because I feel like if there's conflict, you should be able to, as an adult, you should be able to accurately, portray your feelings. But like, if I call you and I'm like, "Hey, this is how I feel," and you're like, and you need time to measure it out, it's like, then did you really care? Like, why do you need time to figure out how you felt? You should know how you felt if there's conflict. That's how I feel. But I think that's just a personal style, which goes to like this big, like there's a lot of miscommunication out there that happens. What's one of the biggest miscommunication stories that you know of?
Miscommunication stories. Are you talking about like it could be professional, it could be personal?
Could be. I mean, I think the story about your parents in the car is a good one. Is there something similar to that, where it's like,
I feel like when I say I'm working on my sarcasm, it's because I'm learning more and more. There are just some people who don't get it, and like it's really hard for me. So just context, my family, like we grew up being sarcastic with one another, primarily my mom, like, and we make fun of each other. So when I go out into the world and my like interpersonal relationships, you might be surprised by this, but not everyone likes being like picked on or poked on. And like, so I've had to like, through feedback and things I've said, be like, that's not okay. I'm trying to think of something like biggest miscommunication. Like, I know I told you the story about my second interview, but I don't know if I would say that here.
Yeah.
I've had like work situations. I guess I can say this. So at Sun Prairie, someone that I worked with was in like an arm sling, and I said like, oh, and like we were in the physical context, we were at like someone's going away party, but like the mayor was there, city administrator, who's very formal but very cool. And I said to the person with the arm sling, I was like, oh, did you like get that in a bar fight? And like they kind of chuckled, but the city administrator was there, and he's like, Jake, we give you a long leash, we really do. And I was just like, this is probably 2 years ago, and I was just like, oh, I don't think that was appropriate to joke about. And so I don't know if that's I guess it's a miscommunication of like, I thought it was funny. It wasn't like not the most like biggest, but I'm trying to think on like a grander scale, a miscommunication. Oh, I actually have a really good example. So when I first started with the city of Sutton Prairie, we're trying to do this like housing study. And I was like, you know what? We should like incentivize people to take this. And one of the ways to incentivize is like, as we all know, is like gift cards. Like, yeah. So I was like, we should get gift cards, but let me talk to the city attorney, or like, we had to outsource. So I called like our attorney. I was like, this is what I'm thinking, whatever. It was like, hey, you're not breaking any like ordinances or whatever. You're good to do it. So I was having like people fill out a survey, and they could get like a gas card if they completed it, whatever. That stuff happens all the time. I know it gets a little bit funny with government, but cleared it with the attorneys. And then like it got picked up and it started circulating online, and then it got into the local paper that we were like buying responses, which is one way to look at it. Like, I think incentivizing is a best practice. Like, yeah, to me, you're asking for people's time, and like you can give them something for it, but people have different views on it. But like the paper put like, and it was like my photo or with it, you know, cities buying responses for like housing study survey. And I was like, we're not buying responses, but I can see how you could see it like that. I mean, if I was only in one specific part of the city, yes.
Yeah, you're not targeting a specific group that's going to be pro or whatever. Yeah, you're just whoever wants to do it can do it. Yeah.
But I just remember like opening it and seeing, I was like, wow, like, did I just make the paper? And it was like city buys responses. So that's an example I would give. You can probably see the article up, but
I was telling me and my wife. So I moved to Madison for my wife when we were having a reception here, and she ordered a keg of root beer for our reception. And the debate is where she told me the keg was. She told me it was at the liquor store on Allen. And she swears she said Allen Boulevard. So I'm new to Madison, put in Allen, and I found Allen Street, which is down by the university. So I drove up and down Allen Street multiple times. And I was like, which liquor store? She's like, the only one on Allen. And I was like, okay, cool. And at this point, I was like, I don't see it. She isn't answering anymore. I got to go to the reception. She's like, where? I was like, I couldn't find the liquor store. And the liquor store was there, was closed. She's like, and it ended up being like on Allen Boulevard, which is like right there by Middleton. Like down by that Lakeside Road. And I was like, you never said Boulevard. And I was like, I put an Allen into my GPS and it gave me Allen Street. She's like, no, I said, and so it's one of those things where it's like that one little boulevard screwed up everything. And then I was just watching today the documentary on Netflix on the Storm Area 51 movement that happened back in the day, and like how that was just like a shit post someone put on like their meme site. It was like, yeah, let's all Storm Area 51, and then turn into like this big thing, and like thousands of millions of people were gonna come. Like that just, again, sarcasm was lost because it was a text on the internet. And that just kind of ballooned into this huge thing. We're like, oh, we're going to storm Area 51. It turned into this whole big debacle. If you guys are listening, I appreciate tuning in. Hit the like and subscribe. Drop in the comments your big miscommunication stories, or if you have any questions, drop them in the chat. Jake, why do you think proper communication is important? Because I think there's some people out there who just go, well, I just, they'll get it or we'll figure it out in the end. So why is proper communication important in both personal and professional life?
Yeah, it's funny that you asked that, because I remember being in college and I went to like it was primarily like science-based school. Like the majors that got the most attention were like pharmacy and pre-vet, which are all like, of course, very important majors. And I remember being like telling people as a communications major, and it was kind of like, like you're a burnout and you're not going to go very far in life. That was kind of the vibe. But it's funny of like when bad things happen in the public and this is kind of getting to the professional side. Yes, you want attorneys, but you also want people who can navigate you through very difficult questions. And those are typically communications people who know how to read the very unforgiving court of public opinion. And so I think on a professional sense, like communications professionals work with legal on like what you can legally say and what you should and how you go about it. And, I just think like, obviously I'm biased, but communication is just, I guess clear, proper communication is so important because we're just in a day and age right now where, cancel culture is real, brand reputation, all those things, they really matter. And people are consuming more with the conscience and, power to the consumer, and they'll cancel you. And yeah, I mean, I just think it's just so important. Kind of so for those like maybe obvious reasons. I think personally, which is where we all struggle, is like, I think knowing how to articulate what you think and what you feel sounds so simple, and it's the hardest thing for everyone to do. And I think that's why we see people who struggle in relationships, they struggle with conflict, because choosing the right words to like really convey what you think and feel is like an art. It's a skill. Like everyone is growing in it. And so I don't even know if I'm answering your original question, but like that's what comes to mind.
No, I think you're dead on, because I think proper communication is, you're right. It's being able to express what you think and feel, but also what you want. And, I've seen those TikToks and videos of like the parents or the teachers that like give their like first grade class, like write me instructions on how to make a peanut butter and jelly. And they do it verbatim. It's like, put peanut butter on the bread, and they just like put it on the top of the bread. They don't like, because you're like, hey, you have to take the bread out and lay the bread. Like it's always like how you have to be specific. And I think we're in a generation, and yes, and my son hates it because I do it out in public, and I did today to him at his therapy. The lady came over to the car, and I said something. I started dropping like all the brain rot terms like Riz and
Yeah.
I was like vibe check, William, and he was like, I want to kill you, and I just do it to embarrass him. We're in this world of like there's new language developing, which is great, but also like we've lost the art of the words. Like we lost that vocabulary to express what we think, feel, and want. And that's why proper communication. So whether it's at work where it's like, hey, I need you to do this, and it's not just this, it's not this, it's this, and it's setting those expectations, whether it's in a relationship of this is what I need or this is how I feel. Like, am I angry or am I frustrated? They're two slightly different things. And there's this, we've talked about this in our group. We have this, emotional wheel, and it's got all these different, you can be angry, but you can be frustrated. You can be, all these different, enraged. There's all these different like synonyms, but also like slightly different meanings. And we've lost that. People just go, I'm angry. And I think that's why we see a lot of people who struggle with their emotions, because they just don't know how to express it, because it's just like, I have this feeling. It's like, what is it? Like, I don't know how to say it. And I think that's why you have to be able to communicate, because you have to be able to get what's inside you out. And if you don't have the words, how do you do it? And I think that's partially why like music is so like very important, because people are like, oh, this song expresses how I feel. It's like, yeah, because it has words. It's the words of what you feel. And I think there's a big part of you have to be able to say what you feel, think, and want, but how you say it matters. We've talked about this with like sarcasm, but do you think we're losing that in today's like how how you say it? So with whether it's tone or language or pace, why is that important? Because I think that's a lost art of we've lost these great public speakers that have these like this great kind of oration, tone and pace and language. When we were hanging out at Costco, we were talking about some of these pastors who have just kind of like this cool like pace, and I think comedians are really great at having that like kind of like that pace and that alliteration and those things. So why do you think that's important? Because I think how you say something is just as important as what you say.
I really do think it's kind of like dining out in a way. And that's not me trying to be like, oh, like really creative, but like that's just what came to mind is like there are people who like some of the joy of eating out is the presentation of the food. Like it's fun to see food put in certain places or baked and cooked in a certain way and have it plated on a certain way. Like there's just an element to it that makes the experience so much better. I just think that's like, I think like you brought up comedy, and it's funny, like when we talk about speakers, there's not like necessarily speakers that come to mind, or the speakers that come to mind are like comedians for me. Like I enjoy being funny, but I've always loved looking at the ability to make people laugh and the timing of things. Like it's just such a creative gift for people to be able to like stand in front and use their words to make people react a certain way, where it relies on delivery, what you say, how you say it, how loud you say it, how quiet you say it. Like, it's just such a, like, it's such an art. And so I don't know, like, I just think like how you say something, and we've all heard that it's like, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. I mean, it's both, but it's like having, like, if you don't know how to say something, it really is like having like a PowerPoint without any like colors. It's just like black and white. There you go. And so I don't know. I love the different ways people talk. It's just so fascinating to me of like two people can hear the same thing and get something completely different out of it. But like, we keep going back to sarcasm, and I don't know about you, Dustin, but like I have gotten like, I've disconnected so much with people sometimes on like, they're like, we thought you were being serious. I was like, no, I was being sarcastic. You're like, oh, but the way you said it made it sound real. And it's like, all right, I've got to work on this. That's just such a good example. Like,
Yeah, it's so funny because, I think you can, I think your dining out analogy is really good, Brick, because I can cook a chicken breast and vegetables, even though I won't eat them. And I can give them to you on a plate and you're like, oh, this is good. And someone else could take that same chicken breast that I made and they could just plate it differently, and it's just going to come because you eat with your eyes first. And chefs will say that like they eat with their eyes and the presentation matters. And I think you're right. Like you can give the same joke to me and you can give it to a professional comedian, and they're going to be 10 times more funny because they're going to pace it out differently. They're going to inflect different things differently. They're going to have that kind of cadence. And that's why like, you listen to comedians. And I love listening to comedians talk about like the process. Like that's why they go on the road and test material out, because they want to test out different pacings and structures and how jokes flow, figure out what actually works. I had Sam Dema on a couple weeks ago, and he's a keynote speaker, so he goes around and speaks for a living, but he's actually taking an improv class to be better at comedy, to kind of inject some more humor into, because he wants to do big stadium shows, which I think he'll get to. He's trying to learn how to inject a little more life into his public speaking, so it's not just him teaching. It's more like because there's that teaching vibe that people get into, but there's also like this like storytelling comedy. And when I get writers, I tell them like, you're just not writing, it's not a research paper, like you're telling a story through written word. And I think like, just if it doesn't read well, that's why I've been telling writers like, find a program that'll actually read your article to you, because like the way it sounds when it's read will be how people will read it in their head, because they'll read it and they'll hear it in their head, and that's super important. Is there a moment when like the how you said something changed everything, whether positive or negative?
Yeah, I would say like, I guess I would say like I'm at a point in my career where like I do a lot of public speaking, or especially when I was with the city of Sun Prairie, where I was going in front of like city council or community members or whatever, or like at conferences. And I think for me is like, I am the best, like I am at my best form when I'm comfortable, and I know I'm comfortable when I know there's like some leeway for humor. Like I know I can like engage with the audience. Like for example, years ago I was voluntold that I had to go present to like all these different city administrators, and I was like, man, that just kind of sounds really boring. And so I went, and it was at like 9 a.m. and I was like, great, like these people probably have been out the night before, like they're not going to really care what I have to say. And I think as soon as I like knew and tested the waters a little bit that I could kind of joke around in my presentation, I was like, oh, okay, this is going to completely change how I communicate it. And it ended up going really well. But I think it's just things like that. That's like, I can read the room and be like, all right, I think my strengths are going to do well here. I think there have been times where I'm like, okay, I cannot joke, or I've tried to joke and it doesn't go well. And maybe it's just because like they just don't find me funny. And it's like, I'm purely here to deliver information and leave. And typically that's when I'm like, all right, this isn't going super well. Like I've given presentations in the past where it's like, I honestly don't think anybody's paying attention. I think they just have to be here and listen to me, and they just want to get me out of the way. So
yeah, I've had situations like my wife always says that I'm yelling at her, and I'm like, I'm not yelling. I'm just I project my voice, and I'm louder than she is. It's not yelling. It's just like making sure you heard me, partially because they don't respond when I say things, which drives me nuts. I did to my son the other day. Like he was like, Dad, I need this. And I just sat there. He's like, Dad. He's like, oh, it's so frustrating when you don't answer me. I'm like, oh, I know. I tell you this all the time. And so a lot of times you're like, I project because I want them to know that like, hey, I'm like maybe yelling up the stairs or whatever. It's like, I'm projecting. I'm not yelling. I'm just being like, I'm being direct and stern with my words. It's not yelling. And I think that goes into part of this is like, are you communicating to be heard, or are you communicating to connect? And I think that's the difference between like personal communication and professional communication. So what's your experience with that? Like dealing with the difference between your professional life communicating in, public office and political arenas versus, hanging out with your friends or talking to your parents?
I think that's a really good question. So I'm in a more like I'm learning and I'm now communicating in a more partisan way. So like when I was with the city of Sun Prairie, I was primarily communicating like to like constituents, to the community about city business, and that wasn't necessarily political. I mean, there were like political undertones, but working in the office of a representative, it's partisan communications for the most part. And so I think the difference is like I am always listening and I'm always mindful of like what I'm hearing and what I'm saying, because it is like it's strategy. It's like it's political strategy. And so I think that just like how like I interact with other staff, or like if I'm, engaging with a representative, or just things like that. It's just little things that some people could overlook, but like because it's so sensitive and people can read or misread things, I'm just so mindful. I think on a personal level, I think like I'm wanting to connect with people and I'm trying to get better at this. And so some of it is like, it's not even so much me communicating, it's me like listening to them and trying to read them. And that kind of informs like how I engage with them. So like, for example, I now know just through listening, there are some friends I have that like, sarcasm is not their thing. There's a way I joke that doesn't land well with them. And that's saved me some trouble, because it's like, oh, I'm listening to you and kind of picking up on things. And so that's what I would say.
Yeah, I think there's a huge difference. And I have always been a communicator to be heard. Like I went to school to be a youth pastor and took classes on public speaking and actually taught people how to public speak. And it was more of like, this is how you are heard. And this is how you make it so people are paying attention, and they're, you're changing up the pace and the tones. People are, connecting to you, and they're listening, and they're hearing you. And I'm trying to learn more of like how to speak so I'm connecting with people. And I think part of it is listening, but part of it is just, again, what I'm saying and how I'm saying it. So it's not going, it's Jake, did you have a good day? And that's a yes or no answer. It's like, hey, Jake, how was your day? And even that, we talk about open-ended questions and those sort of things. And it's like, how do I talk and communicate in a way that allows us to connect more and develop a two-person story versus me just telling you the story? And I want people to involve. That's why I created this podcast. So it's, a 3-person conversation, me, the guest, and the chat, which the chat has been, the slow going, which is understandable. That's how it takes on YouTube. But that's why I want the chat to be involved, because I want people to come in and go, hey, but what about this? And maybe they throw in something that I didn't think of, because I only know what I know, and I don't know what I don't know, and I don't think of things. And I want people to come in with different viewpoints. That's why I want other guests to come on and give their viewpoints of things, because I want to connect with people, not just speak at them and have them hear me.
Yeah. And I think that's hard because, like, for one, some of that I think is like human tendency. Like, I just know there's something in me that likes being like heard. I like attention. I like when people like, I don't know, I like when people listen to me, but I have found like, I think this just comes with age and like interacting with people, but I have more enjoyable like conversations and connection with people when like I'm legitimately trying to listen of like, oh, they like this. Why do they like this? Or like, oh, they're not really a big fan of questions. I'll hold off on like how inquisitive I get. Oh, like they don't like, they're not really as playful as me. And so it's might be easier for them to misread some of my jokes. And so I don't know, like, I think like we all communicate, some more than others and some in different contexts. But I think I'm just learning of like people have such wildly different communication styles. And it's like some jive, some don't.
Yeah.
And it's just such a learning curve. But I don't know. I like that. I just like learning how people get information, like how they interpret it, and then like how they communicate it out. So
yeah. And they'll click on one keyword, like one word that you didn't think they were going to be the keyword, and that's what they pick up on. And I think you're in an interesting field with political communications, because how do you shift your communication between like styles and tone and direction to fit an audience, but still make it feel real and not like you're pandering to them? Because I think that's a lot of times we see that with higher level political communications. It's like they tell you what they think you want to hear, and it comes off very disingenuous. So how do you maintain a sense of like being real and honest and open and connecting with people, but also tailoring your message to them?
I mean, I think that's a good question. And a lot of this is like, so just for context of like who's listening, like I'm the deputy, meaning that there's like, I'm like the junior communications person, and then the senior communications person is the communications director. So just what that looks like is like, he kind of sets the communication strategy and I help like implement it. Not saying that there's not feedback from me, but like I'm kind of the implementer. But to your question of like, I think some of that depends on the person or business or, or agency you're communicating on behalf of, like seeming authentic and not pandering. For some people, that's their strategy. And so like I'm supporting a representative and also like the Democratic caucus or our members in the Democratic caucus in the assembly. And so some of it is like, we want to capture their kind of unique voices. And so there's a fine line of like what that means to be authentic, because you could ask 5 people, like, what does it mean to be authentic? And they might all 5 say different things. And so I don't know if I have a strong answer for that, because it's something that kind of is like relative and you have to develop uniquely for the person. So,
yeah, I think that you're trying to communicate. You are communicating for multiple people all in one message. It's not like you're communicating for person A on Monday and communicating for person B on Tuesday. You're trying to communicate for person A, B, C, D through one message. Like, and that's a hard thing to do. And I think that's part of it, right? Like, I write articles and I'm like, hey, how do I communicate this to the person? I write football articles. So it's like, how do I communicate this person who knows nothing about fantasy football, but also the person that is a diehard football person who knows like all the stats. So it's like that fine balance. So I'm trying to communicate to multiple different people. You're trying to communicate for multiple different people, which is huge. And right. And keeping that authenticness of who you are as a person, right? Keeping kind of the tone that you are, but also your boss and your constituency wants. Like they don't want you going up there cracking jokes, right? Mm-hmm. But you still want to be able to have that kind of levity and lightness to it, so it's not like always down, but like obviously within reason. And so I think being authentic to who you are, being authentic to the voices that you're communicating for, that you're representing, and being also authentic to the people that you're presenting it to, and even that's going to be multiple different people that you have to be authentic to is a really hard thing. But I think there's ways of doing that. I think it's something people need to learn. But do you think in this digital world where everything is typed, emailed, and now we're getting into more like podcasts where it's said and then that's it. Like it's just, this was said and here's a soundbite. Do you think like tone and inflection is kind of like dead in today's society, or do you think it still has a place?
No, I mean, I think I would say it's probably going to get reprioritized more than ever, because there's so much even I see on LinkedIn with AI. And I think some people are having frustrations of like, is this your voice, or is this partially your voice, partially AI, or is it totally AI? And I think now more than ever, people kind of want to know or see like what's really you. And so it's just interesting. I've seen this a lot specifically around kind of like what they call like the M dash that like ChatGPT, for example, will put out of like, it's kind of like, I mean, some people just write using the dash, but ChatGPT is kind of notorious for its output of using that. And so I just think like, as we get more and more, or as we integrate AI more and more into a variety of functions, one of them being communications, a greater desire for like people's real voices will be elevated. And so, yeah, I think things like tone and inflection and cadence and real things that maybe AI can't really fully replicate will just be more important kind of now more than ever.
Yeah, I completely agree, especially with AI. And something I've been talking about, like AI has such a just like deadpan like response, and it sounds very, and like it's just very black. And I think there is part of like that, having that tone. And when I'm editing articles from other writers, it's like, hey, this is not how I would have wrote the article, but if you want to write it that way, that's fine. Like I wouldn't have said this, but like if you do, and like there's hey, there's too many jokes in here, and this is a joke that like I had someone write an article and they like made a reference to some like really niche like show, and I was like, hey, I understand what it is, but most people won't know what it is. Like it's too niche to be like a broad topic. And so I do think tone is still available in today's world. I think there's people need to learn. I think it's a lost skill because I think public speaking when I was in school wasn't like a class, but like you had to give up and give oral presentations. I don't know if that happens anymore. Like my son is going into 6th grade. I think he's done like 2 or 3 oral presentations. He hasn't done a ton. I was like, I remember doing them all the time. And it was just like, that's what you did. And you learned that kind of, you get over the fear, you learn how to do that. And like, it's about reps. And I was just on a podcast before this, and there was a guy, it was his 9th episode. I was like, hey man, you did a good job, but you're just getting the reps in. Like, it's just, practice makes perfect. And so I think that's something that we need to teach more, and it's getting lost in schools, but I definitely think there's something that needs to happen to teach, tone and inflection and all those things, and that teach the how and get people more comfortable with communicating.
I honestly think too of like, it's funny. I was actually having this conversation, and I bet you might feel the same way, is like, Dustin, I'm sure like you could be in front of people and just not like, I could put you in front of people and you probably like, all right, I've got this. Like, just tell me what to talk about. Like, I'm not saying I never get nervous, but I was telling this to a mentor, and he was like, I was like, there's sometimes I'm like, I can't believe like what I do gets considered work, and I'm not trying to like, in the profession, but it's like, I just don't always view going in front of people as this like momentous type thing. And he was like, I get it, but to some people, like that's huge. That is just something they could not perceive themselves doing. And so I think it's just so interesting of like, I mean, everyone has to, I think, yes, learn, just kind of like everyone has to learn a degree of math, which I'm terrible at. Everyone has to learn like a degree of knowing how to like present information. And I think certain personalities and skill sets and people just cling to it more naturally. But yeah, it's definitely just something that like, for me, it's like, oh, I enjoy this. I like it. I can't believe like this is work. For some people, it's like, oh, if I never have to stand in front of anyone ever, I'm good for the rest of my life.
Yeah, it's funny because at my previous employer, we did a whole, training day. They were talking about, your personality, your ETJNs or whatever. And they had a whole thing. She had on the back of the wall, she had different things. It was like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, a day, 2 days, a week, 2 weeks, a month, 2 months. And she's like, hey, if I had told you had to go up to and speak in front of 50 people about what you do every day, how much time would you need to prepare? And she's like, go stand under the time frame that fits you. And I was like, under like just give me 5 minutes. Like I'm at the lowest, like whatever's the lowest is, I was there. And there's people down there like, I need like 6 months. And it was just like, and most people were in that like month, like 2-3 week month to 2 month period. And so she came and she was like, why are you there? And I was like, because I can do this. Like, this is what I do. Like, this is what I've trained my whole life. Like, this is no big deal. Like, speaking in front of people is not a big issue. And she brings the other, and they're like, I hate it. I hate talking. She's like, I hate this right now. She's like, I don't want you to ask me questions.
Yes.
And it's just right. So we whatever. And my boss came to me, he's like, just remember that, like, just because you're comfortable doesn't mean everybody else is. And it's so true that, like, I think everyone needs to get a baseline comfortability, but there are going to be people who are just better at it. And that's fine. I think everyone needs to have I think the problem is that society as a whole, when it comes to communication, is at a 2, and I think everyone needs to be at a 5. And I think we're just lacking.
Yeah.
Who are some of the people that you've... Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to ask, who are some of the people that you've modeled your communication style after, that you're like, man, this is a person that like I think communicates well, and I wish I communicated like them?
That's a really good question. And I know like what should precede my mouth is like, I mean, I will like name specific people. I mean, not who I one time said, but and I know if whoever's listening is gonna be like, what does he keep talking about? But that's gonna be between you and I. Let me say this first. Like growing up, I really liked watching just people sing and perform and tell jokes in front of people. And like, I don't know if it was so much, it's like, let me like copy their style. I think it's like, wow, like, what is it like to be so comfortable with yourself and use your personality that way to wield or to like get that type of reaction? And so I guess the first thing I would say is like, I think through not idolizing people, but like watching them, my communication style has been more like, how does Jake say things? And like, how does Jake show up in front of city council or, a group of community members? And so I think it's more so of like, they're really comfortable with themselves. I should learn to do the same thing. So I guess maybe that's like number one. But people I've watched when I talk about comedians from like Wanda Sykes, or this could sound really weird, but like I used to really like the Comedy Central roast, which are like really crazy.
Yeah, they're great.
They're so clever but so bad. I think some of that. I think like, you know, you look at political figures like Obama is a great communicator, like political press secretaries, you know, like Jen Patsky, and like there are people in like the church or just like in general religious sphere that, you know, like people often credit like Billy Graham as being a really strong communicator, preacher. But I guess like all those people, one, are themselves. Two, they like they believe in what they're saying. And so I think it just comes more naturally. And that's what I want to emulate, but like for Jake, like if that makes any sense.
No, that totally makes sense. You know, people have asked me about, you know, doing this podcast. And I've always said, like, I've modeled the way I handle this podcast after really three things: Colin and Samir, which is another podcast, and the way specifically, I guess both of them, Colin and Samir, they co-host a podcast where they interview people and how they, you know, proceed the community, how they continue the conversation going and let it build. Sean Evans from Hot Ones, I love the way he just interacts and connects with his guests. I think just the way, like, even through the scorching hot wings that they're eating. And then, you know, on ESPN PTI, Michael Wilbon and Tony Kornheiser, you know, that show for me was like that back and forth of that banter was something I was like, oh, I love Michael Wilbon and just the way he like bantered back and forth. And then I think you're right. Like there are comedians who just do such a great job. Like the roast are good. Like Tony Hinchcliffe on the Tom Brady roast was just like his pacing was just great, right? Like I may not agree with like everything he says, but like things, and like there's pastors, like, you know, I talked about Rod Parsley, who's a pastor from Ohio. I don't love everything, like I don't agree with everything Rod Parsley preaches, but the way he preaches it, you're just like, he could be reading like a menu and it just like it comes off, you're like, okay, this is like, yeah, he's just because the way he says things and he builds and he's got this pacing and the alliteration. You know, other comedians like Bert Kreischer, Matt Rife, you know, Norm Macdonald had this kind of like just these distinct pacing and distinct tone and just kind of flowed, and they kind of, the way they said things dictated the way the conversation goes, not necessarily the questions or like what they were saying. It's like the way they said, they could say anything and they could make a conversation ebb and flow and build the story because of the way they were able to tell things. So I think comedians, I think pastors, I think you're right. There's political speakers. Like when you talk about, you know, these great, like Obama just comes up there and say things like, you know, JFK, we get up there and, you know, it's not what fear, you know, it's not what you can do for your country. It's like all these like great, you know, presidents we've had and these communication speakers who just come out and say things in a way that you go, oh man, that was powerful. And it's never powerful because like what it is, what they say, but it also is like how they said it makes it powerful. So I've taken a lot of that, but for me, it's been Colin and Samir, Sean Evans, and Pete Sauer, like my three main like cornerstones of like how I want to conduct this podcast and like how I want to handle myself in terms of like an interview style podcast, which I think is huge. And I think you're right. It's, this is a whole nother podcast probably of like, you can take inspiration from someone and be inspired by them, but you don't want to imitate them. Right. So I think you're talking the same thing. Like I'm inspired by them. I'm not imitating them. And you take what they did and it inspires you to create your own spin on it and be authentically you and authentically me, but have some of those kind of, you know, markers. And I think we talk about film, you know, you can see like this director was playing homage to this style of movie. And it's like, yeah, that's the way it goes. This director liked this guy, so he does things in that style, but it's a imitation, you know, they were inspired by it, not just a straight imitation of it.
Yeah. I mean, and I think like in a political context, it's interesting because, you know, we have like 45 members in the Democratic caucus. And so what's interesting is like each of those representatives, I'm speaking for the assembly, they have their own districts that their own constituents they talk to. And there are representatives that, you know, because I'll see the press releases they put out on their own, they all have different ways of phrasing or saying things. And so it's just, I agree kind of everything we've said of like, I just think what I'm drawn to and I'm learning to do for myself is like, I like seeing, even if I really don't agree with what they say, like how people say certain things in a way that's so specific to their personality and they're not trying to be someone else. So I think just if you're really interested and care about what you say, but also speaking in a way that like fits who you are, I'm just drawn to that and want to emulate that for myself.
Yeah. I just have thought like, it's a lot of like rap music, right? Cause you have like West Coast rap, which is very different than East Coast rap, which is very different than like Atlanta rap and like the Houston rap and like the mumble rappers. Like it's all rap, but it's all like this different nuanced styles in the way. And you can listen to someone and go, oh, man, that guy's clearly sounds a lot like X, right? He sounds like a West Coast rapper. And you can kind of, they have that flair and that feel and the way they kind of syncopate and they do all those things. And there's that different style and they each have their own style. And I think we can learn from them and create our own style, right? And the terms we use and, everyone's got their own slight, different terms for things, especially here in the Midwest. There seems like there's a different term for everything. Whether it's a water fountain or a drinking fountain or a bubbler, right? That's part of your communication style. And if you're going to be, some people lean into that kind of like local colloquialisms types things more than like I would, but like that's just their style. They're more of that down home feel, and that's fine. That's who you are. And I think that's a big thing. If you could give one advice to someone who's like, man, I want to communicate better, what piece of advice would you give?
Like you're gonna fumble and just keep on going. Like that's not very encouraging. Yeah, I don't know. Like I think like I don't know what context they want to be a better communicator in. Maybe it's interpersonal or professional, but I do think there's a lot of wisdom in like, and I'm still growing in this too, of like reading the room, AKA learning your audience, like AKA listening. Like I would not say like I'm getting to be a better listener, but like there's just something about the kind of being in osmosis of like absorbing, paying attention to what people do and how they say and how they joke, that like what information you can grab will inform how you communicate. Like there have been times, I'm still newer to my role, where I'm intentionally like holding back because I'm like, I'm reading the room and I don't know. So therefore I'm just going to like keep learning. And that informs how I engage and communicate. So if I had to simplify that, I would just say like learn and listen and then let that inform how you communicate. And like, yeah, I mean, like, I wouldn't say you see someone tell a joke and now you're gonna like, all right, now I'm gonna do my whole stand-up routine, but just like vibe it out. Like, what's the vibe? To put it in like Gen Z language.
Yeah, vibe check, right?
Vibe check. It's for real. It's like for real a thing. Like, what's the vibe? So
yeah, my piece of advice would be like, don't hit send. Like, give it a time to breathe. So like, I think a lot of times people will, especially in texting, the email will just fire it off quick and hit send and be like, oh, I probably shouldn't have sent that. Like, it's okay to type it out or, on a text or an email, or even like write it out. If you're like, hey, I'm going to say this to this guy later, and then like, let it sit and come back to it. And then look at it with like some time or perspective and go, okay, maybe I wasn't, and let the emotions kind of like cool off or maybe settle down a little bit and go, okay, oh, this is what I really meant, or this is what I really felt, or hey, this word doesn't really fit exactly what I meant, and kind of thing. Because I think we just get so quick reactionary that we're like, boom, text, and it's like, oh, I didn't mean it that way, I meant this. Like, just take some time and take some time to think through it and allow it to breathe. Just, it doesn't have to be long. It could be a minute. It could be 2 minutes. Like, you don't have to like go a day. You can like type something out, go grab a drink, fill up your glass with water or whatever, come back and go, okay, do I really still feel this way? Is this exactly what I meant? How is this going to be? Like, and just think about it and like run that through your mind. I see it with my wife all the time. We'll be in the car and I can see her like little hands. I'm like, who are you having a conversation with? She's like, I'm going through this conversation at work that I'm going to have tomorrow. I was like, okay, that's a great practice. Like, just give it some time to think it through, because that snap judgment will always generally, unless you're a well-trained communicator, will generally put words out there that you don't necessarily mean. They might be close, and close is okay, but close is never right. And if you're just close, you're never going to get exactly there, because you have to try to like backtrack those specific things instead of like you're backtracking the conversation instead of moving the conversation forward. So just take some time.
Yeah, and if I can add, this is more like personal pet peeve. One of my biggest pet peeves, and maybe this can make me sound so like arrogant or whatever. I really struggle with like bad storytellers, and what I mean by that is like, and this is no offense to anyone, but like if you're a bad storyteller, you just got to own it. But like people who are like, oh, I have a story, and it like takes 5 minutes to like get to the point, or they're messing up the details, and they're like, oh, actually, no, wait. Like, I would say if you cannot tell your story, this is probably makes me sound so snobby, but if you cannot tell your story in like 40 to 30 seconds or less, you gotta move on, or you gotta pick something else. So yeah, but I think we hit on a lot.
Yeah. Well, this is great. I appreciate you coming on. You are Jake King. I'll just give you an outro. Jake King, he's a political communications expert working for the city of firmly with some prairies. With now he's with the state legislator in Wisconsin here. Jake, I appreciate you coming on and talking communications. If you're listening and you like this episode, please hit that like and subscribe. It really does help me out. Try and do more of these. Got some more people lined up to come on. Drop a comment in there. We'll always get back to you. If you have questions about communications or questions about anything, feel free to drop in the comments. Jake, any parting words?
No, I'm past my bedtime. I took my melatonin before this. So I'm literally closing this and going right to bed. But I do appreciate you having me on. It's always fun to talk communication. It's always fun to talk to you. And so, yeah, man, I really appreciate it.
No problem. We'll have to do a Costco run sometime soon.
Dude, yes. I got to restock on some things, and you're kind of my connector to it too. So I appreciate the Costco tour.
All right. I appreciate everybody tuning in. We'll see you guys next time.
See ya.
Thanks for tuning in to Bridge the Gap.